How do you track your networking success? Hey, I'm Donnie Bovine, the CEO and founder of Success Champion Networking and author of Endless Stream of Referrals. This is Growth Mode, a podcast all about growing and scaling your business. Hanging out with me, as always, my buddy Kevin Snow, the sales and automation tactician and genius. And on this episode, we're going to really dive into how do you track your networking so you know that it's actually working for your business. All right.
So this is a question that I got asked all the time at a certain period of my life. People would always come up to me and they say, well, I don't think this networking thing works. And number one question I would always ask is, well, how do you know? And no one can ever freaking give me a good answer because no one ever actually paid attention to their numbers. I know it was really super frustrating for me because everyone was saying, well, this isn't generating any revenue for me. And then I'd pull up the numbers that we were tracking, and it'd be like, well, you received 50 referrals last year. Did you not close any of them? Well, I probably did. You have to track your numbers. And I can't comprehend how people can do any type of marketing and not know what type of results they're getting and not be able to say, yes, this, my money's actually working well for me and I'm spending it in the right way.
No, I think you're right. I learned kind of the hard way to start looking at what I was doing and making sure it was a successful endeavor. Man, we're both kind of stumbling over our words today, so we're gonna muscle through this motherfucker today. But you know, so I mean, early on for me, I can tell you that I was the networker, man. That guy that was just fucking everywhere. I was at every event, doing every after hour, doing every luncheon, every ribbon. I mean, anything I could do to be around people, I was at. And I remember sitting down with my boss at the time, and he looked at me and he asked me a really fascinating question. And he said, Donnie, you're doing all this stuff. Everybody in town knows who you are. He goes, I can't go anywhere without somebody bringing up your name. He goes, but do you know what's working for you? Do you know what's actually bringing in business? Do you know where your money's coming from all these activities? And I had to look at him and say, actually, no. He goes, so why are you doing all this stuff if you don't know what's working? So I had to come up with a way to figure out where I was spending my time that was actually making money for everything that we were doing. And it wasn't an easy activity to take out all the activities that you're doing and put them somewhere to where you can track and see where success comes from. So I had to put together a process. And I think, for a lot of people, they're just winging it out there in hopes that if they meet enough people, that business is going to work for them. And that's what Kevin and I are going to kind of walk you through is how it's a surefire way to go broke. So, Kevin, for you, I mean, how did you come upon the idea of really tracking your stats and figuring out where you should be spending your time?
So for anyone that listens to the show, you all know I am super analytical, so I like numbers. So it always just made sense to me. Even when I was doing corporate sales, I was tracking all my numbers. I knew how many calls I needed to make to get an appointment. I knew how many appointments I need to get a sale. And I knew what events were generating revenue for me. And because I did a lot of association marketing for when I was at Nextel. So I was working with specific industry associations. So, and I was tracking, all right, so this one's getting me business. This one's not. Hey, marketing, we don't need to pay money for this because I haven't sold a damn thing. But we got to keep this one because every time I talk to someone, they're like, oh my God, let's meet. So tracking was always a big thing for me because that's how I figured out what was working for me and what wasn't and how I improved. When I got into the big networking piece, it just made perfect sense for me as well to be able to track, am I closing business? Am I getting the right stuff? And it helped me then be able to adjust what I was telling people and how I was teaching my network to introduce me. Because if I was getting a bunch of crappy stuff, crappy referrals, obviously I was saying something wrong and I was teaching them the wrong way. So it was just a natural progression for me. And then I took it to that next step where I started tracking my referral partners and figuring out which of my referral partners were really performing and which ones I need to spend more time with or which ones I need to cut loose. So for me, it just over time, it kept growing and it became just a key way that I did business because I learned really quick that I'm not good at time management, so I need to make sure what I'm spending time on is actually the right stuff, so that then I could focus and make sure I was wasn't getting distracted by this next cool thing that was going to make me rich.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that because is mine came from a question asked to me. But what's fascinating about hearing your side of it in comparison to what I knew is I was doing everything you talked about as well. I mean, in sales, you cannot find success if you don't know what's working and what's not working. From tracking your cold calls, tracking your conversations and where everything's going and all the branches and moving parts. And I had just not applied that to networking. It was the one sales activity I was doing that I legitimately just wasn't tracking to make sure it was a successful, type
Yep.
thing. So for me, some of the first things that I had to do was to figure out, okay, what is actually working? And what I realized as I looked at all my sales tracking that I had one commonality that I was tracking everywhere else. That luckily, anytime I had a prospect in the pipeline, I tracked what was my first touch. So that helped me out tremendously. So I think no matter where or what you're tracking in sales, the first thing you got to understand is where did you first meet or come in contact with this person? And that's how I started with my stats and network.
And it's funny because that's the one thing that most small businesses don't track.
Mm.
When I would go in and I was doing sales
Well, from a marketing or
yeah,
sales standpoint.
totally. When I would walk
Yeah.
into a client and ask them, all right, so where are you getting your clients from? What's the number one source? They would have to guess. They weren't
Right.
tracking that, hey, this was a marketing lead. They didn't even know if it was marketing or sales lead if they were that advanced and had a marketing program going on. But they didn't know if it was
Or what's the
or yeah,
difference?
exactly. What's the difference? But they couldn't tell me. Well, these people called in. They reached out proactively. These were cold calls. This was a networking thing. This is from the ad that we placed in this industry mag. They didn't know what was making their phone ring, which is really scary because you mentioned earlier that not tracking is the quickest way to go broke, and I believe that's absolutely true. Because if you don't know what you're spending your money on and the results you're getting, you're just going to keep spending money and hope it works. Say hopium is a thing, but it's not it's
Yeah.
not an effective way to run your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I go back to, and I'm sure you did kind of the same thing, is when you're doing all the lunches and all the happy hours and everything, I mean, you're spending money on food, you're drinking, so you're spending a lot of cash. And if you don't know what the return on that investment, if you don't look at it like an investment, you're not playing the game right. But if you don't understand what the return on those investments are, and some of them were organizations you had to be a part of, associations you paid fees on, and you need to know that the money you were investing in was actually paying out. And starting off by tracking what that first touch was, it was a fascinating exercise for me to go back and look at my CRM, and which for me has always been an Excel spreadsheet because I never got fancy. But that first touch allowed me to say, okay, did they come from a chamber? Did they come from an after hour? Did they come from association? And that first time I actually sat down and went, okay, where's all my business coming from? It was a quick eye opener because they weren't coming from the
Hmm.
after hour activities,
Yep.
right? They weren't coming from all the drinking and stuff. They were coming from the morning breakfasts, and they were coming from the associations, and they were coming from the things that I was actively participating in. And it was the first time that I really realized that, CEOs do breakfast, middle management does lunch, and your salespeople do after hours. And it was a fascinating, eye opening moment for me because I realized that I could give up the after hours and all that time I could spend with my family and double down on doing things in the mornings or doing the associations and things that were working really, really, really well for me.
Yeah, I
So,
had the same thing with the associations as well. It was really cool because Nextel had a really nice marketing budget, and I could come to them and say, "Hey, I want to join this association." They'd say, "Okay, cool," but at some point, then they'd come back and ask me if it was being successful, and I'd be like, "Crap." So I had to figure that out how to.
no, I just wanted to spend your money.
Yeah, no,
Success. I just wanted to go
so,
drink.
but so then I had to figure that out, and you realize that I moved the same tracking stuff I did for cold calling to my associations. But I really quickly stopped doing all those after hour events as well. There's a big event called I think it's called Network After Work, and it's basically
Hmm.
just a giant party. And I went to it a
Yeah,
couple.
that's a great
I
way to
went to
plug
it a
it.
couple times, and I had a lot of fun. Met a lot of people, but they were all salespeople. I think
Yeah, completely pointless as far as growing your
I met
business.
maybe a business owner, and which
Yep.
was cool. But yeah, it was fun. Lots of drinks. Spent lots of money. And I didn't get anything off of it. So I really then got more back into the association piece where they were doing actual stuff that owners wanted to be involved in.
Yeah, I love it. And this is why you got to track, because this it will highlight that you're doing the right things in your business. So what do people actually need to be tracking to make sure that the networking that they're doing is actually successful? Besides first touch, where do they go from
So
there?
obviously, who the referral is, where you got the referral. But then the two things that I track that I started out tracking was did they actually meet with me and did I close them? What was the result? Those were the two things I started tracking right away. And then as I started realizing I was getting referrals from referrals, then I added in, did they refer me? As something else I was tracking so that I could see who my best I could start identifying potential referral partners. But really, it doesn't have to be complicated. This could be a
No,
super easy
I
tracking system of, hey, who is it and did they close? Yes, perfect. And now you know.
right. And I love that simplicity of it. The only thing that I really added up front, and I added a couple of things, but I started listing out the events and the associations and the lunches, and I started going, okay, how many contacts did I meet during that time? How many were potential prospects that were a part of that? And by doing that over a couple months, it really showed me more of the events that needed to get more laser focused on. So for me, it was, tracking, the success of the actual event itself after I quit doing all the happy hours. Once I started looking at, the individual success of the event, I started saying, okay, how many people did I meet? How many did I get a next step with? Um, were we going to go grab a cup of coffee? Were they invite me in their office? Will they come into my office? And what that allowed me to do was look at my overall activity in the event to know that if I was doing the right activities inside the event to move it forward. And because I've always sucked at follow up, I know that I had to game my own system. If I didn't get a meeting set at the event, at the activity, at the thing, I wasn't getting a meeting set, right? Because I just sucked at follow up. So I had to do it right then and there. So it was a fascinating number. I mean, the first time I looked at my conversion to I met somebody to a meeting, it was low. And what I realized is I just wasn't asking enough people to go on some sort of first date, if you will, go from this event to let's sit down and actually have a business conversation. And I think, that's a really key moment for people to go, okay, am I doing the right activities inside the networking? But to your point, just keeping it simple of, who did I meet? Did they close? will be a billion times further along the line than most people, have ever
Yeah.
done prior to
And
that.
I think I really had two systems. I had the system that I just shared, which was really for my networking groups, where I was a member, and the whole goal was passing referrals. Then it was really just tracking who was the referral, did they meet with me, and did they actually close. And it was really super simple. For my associations, I think I did go deeper. I did track, all right, so what events am I going, how many people am I meeting, and had a little more robust tracking in there. But it was still really easy. I just needed to be able to pull up numbers to show marketing, say, all right, so here's the results. Here's the events I've
Mm,
done. Here's how many people I've met. Here's how many people met with me. Here's how many closed. And then as I got better, then I added in revenue. Or, for Nextel, it
mm,
was more actually number of phones. How many phones did we sell them? So then I could say, hey, so this
nice.
generated, 500 phones last year. Sweet, perfect. We'll keep
Yeah.
paying money. Uh, but it was also the other cool thing that's tracking, especially for like associations and these types of organizations that you might be selling into. The other thing I looked at was, how did they engage with us as an association? Were they open to us doing stuff? Were they trying to help us get in front of their members, or was it really here's our book? Go. Thanks for your money. Go participate. And I found the ones that I was most successful at were the ones who wanted to help us and wanted to figure out how we could be in front of their members, and actually help their members be successful. And then it became much
Yeah.
easier. So starting to track those types of conversations became a selling point as well when I went back to marketing, because I could say, all right, so this one, they're starting off slow, but here's all the stuff they're doing. They're being proactive with us and inviting us to do things and get involved. We need to keep working with this because this is going to hit. As opposed to the one it's like that I never talked to anyone at after I joined.
Right. And I like that you could look at it and actually justify the investment, and have some parameters of, should I renew? Should I do this again? And I think if more associations would help their members, actually track what's happening inside the association for them, that they would retain a lot more of their people overall. Something else that I started tracking was this kind of spider web idea of, was I meeting people that could, if they weren't the right person, but their Rolodex of contacts were the right people I needed to meet. So I started collecting people in different associations and different, breakfast events that had either a knack for getting all the CEOs together, or they had the ability to get me to different CEOs. And there was a couple of guys that I used to do a ton of networking with that we would both kind of, or three of us actually, would play the room on, okay, who do you know is going to be at this event that's going to be sitting with the type of people that you need to be. And we started keeping, and we'd sit down, kind of this, power team, our small little board of directors group, and we'd sit down and go, okay, what events are coming up, who do we know that's going to be at that event? Is that one going to be worth our time? And we could quickly evaluate based on, is this, the type of people that we need to get engaged with, or can they get us to? And based on those evaluations, we could find. So it was an interesting thing to kind of, track the spider web, if you will, of where all the connections you were meeting, who they were connected to. It was also fascinating to look at all those connections and go, okay, where else are they networking? We found a lot of different networking opportunities by looking at these people who were good at collecting, our ideal clients, or were our ideal clients. And we found other association, other trades, other events and things to attend, because we were tracking, what other activities they were doing. And some of that came from just generalized conversations. Some of that came from looking at their LinkedIn profiles, because people tend to, uh, you know, put their associations and things they're a part of on their LinkedIn profiles, which was a really nice way to glance and go, okay, well, let's see what's going on there. Um,
No,
go ahead.
I think that's really cool. that's not something I ever actually thought of doing, was trying to track where other people would network at, and then figuring out, all right, so they go here. Was that a good event? So I think that's really cool, and I wish I would have thought of that. But the funny thing is, that was a question that I would ask at events, especially if it was someone who I could tell was more the social type person, the high I. All right, so where else do you network? What other events do you go to that are awesome, that you meet a ton of people at? Because then they got to share their experiences, which was a cool way to get into conversation with them. So I was asking the question, but I never tracked it. So I think that's a really cool
Mm.
way to expand your network and not get stuck in that same rut of, all right, I'm going to this same chamber event this month, and it's a monthly thing, and that's where you go.
Yeah, we and I probably need to teach this idea to Success Champions Networking on our Thursday training. But I used to create like these buckets of where were these clusters of people. So I had like this client bucket, and inside that clients bucket, we were looking at very specifically who were they connected to, what did they network. And then I had our vendors bucket, where vendors that were doing business with us, and we would track where they connected to, and what are they involved with. And I collected these different buckets of people because I wanted to know, were we hitting all the places that we needed to get in front of our ideal prospects and clients. So I think if people will start looking at their network as more of a spider web or maybe a cluster map, they're going to see that there's a lot of things intertwined. And what's fascinating is by looking where everybody was spending their times and how they were connected and what they were doing, we oftentimes found that this client would maybe be a part of association that another one of our clients were a part of. So we would go to that association, and we'd already know a couple people part of the association, would help with the transition of invading that particular association and getting dove in a little bit deeper into what we were doing.
Yeah, it's
you know
it always helps to know people when you go to the event.
for sure, for sure, for sure. So, guys, on this one, I think the biggest thing to think about is to keep it very, very, very simple, but to start tracking what's happening inside of your networking groups, your networking events, your association, trade shows, all the likes, and start looking at what is happening inside of it, and is it really worth your time? And if you can't find the ROI of all the things you're doing, then you're just going to get frustrated and continue to spin your wheels, and likely be spending time in places that are bringing you no value, and you're becoming the networker. And we'll always say, you don't want to be the networker, you want to be the connector, the person that can open doors for other people. So big action step this week is create some sort of simple system for you to track your stuff, whether it's inside your CRM, whether it's Excel spreadsheet, but dive into it and say, here's where we can find success. So you can come back and reference it. And as always, guys, do us a favor. If you got any tips, tricks, any value out of this episode, please make sure you're subscribed, leave us a 5-star review, and share this out with one person who you think would find value in this. And as always, love you, mean it. See you. Bye.